Hello out there. How's everybody doing? This is everybody's favorite conservative in New York, Christopher Wright, here to present you with the Chris Wright Show, another one of my relaxed back and chats. I got a very special guest with me today. And I've met her in the past. I've been to two Turning Point USA Black Leadership Summit events, and that's where we initially met. And this young woman, she's a real patriot. She really knows her stuff. She's a fighter. She's online all the time, just standing up for conservatism in the U.S. And I just had to get her to come on the Chris Wright Show and say her piece. So I'm going to introduce her now. Her name is Shekinah Ruth, and I just want her to go ahead and introduce herself and give you guys a little bit of background on who she is and what she's about.
So basically, I'm a social media influencer, and I started talking about politics in 2016 when President Trump was running for the presidency. And Candace Owens was actually the initial person that got me involved in politics because he invited me to the first Black Leadership Summit, and it just kind of went from there. And I've grown my social media a bunch since then. But yeah.
Wow. So how do you initially meet Candace? Like, did she just reach out to you? Like, were you just online kind of getting your word out there and she saw it, or how did that happen?
So it was like before she really blew up, and she was still doing YouTube videos.
Well, she was red pill black girl still.
Yeah. And I commented on her Instagram about why I agreed with her and why I really liked her video. And she commented back and said, "You're free. You understand what I'm talking about." And she started following me.
Wow.
And it just went from there. She invited me to the Black Leadership Summit, and she really is the reason why I ended up changing my major. Well, I'm not in school anymore, but I changed my major to political science when I got into college because of her. And I started going into Turning Point USA events, and now I'm an ambassador for Turning Point USA. And yeah, everything completely changed after talking to her and her inviting me to these different events.
Yeah, she really is influenced herself. She changed a lot of young black folk people lives. What she was doing. I remember when she just came out red pill black girl in her first video, and I commented as soon as I saw it, I was like, "Keep doing what you're doing. I see it. I like it. Keep going." And of course, I got in like an argument with like five woke leftists, black leftists about being a coon Uncle Tom, and I schooled every single one of them. But I mentioned that to her when I met her for the first time at the TPUSA event. So she's really done a lot for the black conservative movement in this country. All right, so let me go ahead and ask you the questions. I got a few questions for you that it's been, on my mind. So I want to ask you when we finally got a chance to talk. My first question to you is, what's your opinion on this whole George Floyd issue, and who between George Floyd and Officer Derek Chauvin do you feel was in the right and who was in the wrong in its entire situation?
I think the officer, well, first of all, I think the officer was completely in the wrong. And if you actually look at the entirety of the situation, this officer has had 17 to 20 different complaints previous to this, and this is not the first man that he's killed. And so he has a history of being a bad cop. And so you have to question what type of accountability is being held in law enforcement, and also how well the training in law enforcement is still now, currently, because there's even conservative police officers that have been saying that the training that law enforcement goes through is not
Sorry, got a little
as
buffering going on.
educational.
1 second here. Come on. Don't be like that. Yeah, sorry about that,
There you
Shakina. We had like a little
go.
buffering issue. But what you're saying, you were saying like you mentioned the training with the law enforcement and it kind of broke up there. So what were you left off from there?
So there's a lot of conservative law enforcement officers that even been talking about how they've become more lackadaisical when it comes to training for police officers, and
Mhm.
that they don't make it a focal point to work on how officers can be better at fighting and learning jujitsu and learning how to get people off of their balance, and not initially resorting with their gun, and not initially resorting in to different issues like that. But the other issue is he didn't even use a specific type of movement that is allowed. Like, you're not allowed to put your knee on the neck of someone as a police officer. That's against law enforcement training. And so I really think that this is just a situation of a bad cop, a really bad cop that's had multiple different complaints. On George Floyd's side, I think that there should be justice for his family. And I think that justice is being served. I think that the law is doing what they're supposed to be doing. And I think that they are getting charged correctly with what happened in the crime committed. So um, that's kind of my initial stance on it. But I also think that George, the way that people are going about this situation is also not very productive either. And the way that people are depicting George Floyd is not productive either. So I think that there's a lot of issues on both sides of the matter.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. I see where you're coming from. And, it was something that was, you didn't see every day. It kind of had me, I'm a little older than you are, but I remember when Rodney King happened. And I
Mhm.
remember the video footage that came out when that happened and how a lot of people felt, not just in the black community, but just in the country in general. How it just made your skin crawl kind of watching it. And it kind of gave me that feeling again, seeing the video footage of that situation. So it kind of brought back that kind of way, that kind of situation with everything that happened. And it's funny that you mentioned how you feel about how some in the black community are handling the situation, the protesting and everything, because that kind of leads into what my next question was. And my next
Mhm.
question was, what's your stance on Black Lives Matter and the supposed peaceful protests happening across the country? Or are there protests over police brutality happening in this country? Is it justified? Do you believe? I mean, do you believe what they're doing is their marching is justified the way they're doing it? And do you think there's a police brutality issue in this country?
So I believe that everybody has the right to peacefully protest. I think that's in the First Amendment, and I think that we should uphold that. And I also think that there's been issues of law enforcement that have actually been brutalizing people that have been peacefully protesting, which I don't think is good. And I think that that's completely justifiable. Do I necessarily think that, and I will say this, there's in some areas, they are actually making it an opportunity for people to make sure that they're registered to vote and vote for people locally that are going to make a difference when it comes to police reform and police policy reform.
Hmm.
So I think that there can be some productivity to the protests. Overall, I think police brutality is an issue. I don't believe that it is an epidemic. I don't believe that every single police precinct has the same exact issues, but I do believe that we have an issue and that it's okay to peacefully protest about it. I'm very disappointed in the looting and rioting. I know some people think that that is a justifiable cause in regards to a tyrannical form of government, but I do not agree with it. And especially the looters, I think that they're complete opportunists. I understand that people are burning down police precincts, but I don't think that that truly changes the state of our law enforcement policy and what we do at a national level when it comes to training. I don't think that that's going to be beneficial. And Black Lives Matter, particularly, there are Black Lives Matter activists that are being peaceful, and I think that they reserve the right to being able to peacefully protest, regardless of my disagreements of defunding the police, which again I don't think is a viable solution at all. I think that's ridiculous. But there are Black Lives Matter activists that are also looting and burning down buildings, and again, I don't agree with that either. I think that that is a problem, and I also think that Antifa is a problem. And I also think that they're encouraging a lot of this as well. And it's not, I don't think it's justifiable.
No, I absolutely agree with you on that statement. I've done a couple videos here in the city because they've been protesting in Manhattan and Brooklyn, nearby where I live a lot. And the night when the infamous night where you see people in New York City, like on Fifth Avenue and Times Square, like a lot of popular areas in the city, just looting and rioting. I wasn't a part of that. I had a opportunity to go to that with some people that offer, hey man, we can go there, check it out. You can record, get some content, but I don't want to participate in anything like that. I mean, I'm a Christian man. I don't believe in stealing. And so I didn't want to even be around people possibly completely, doing any nonsense like that. But I have been involved in a couple marches, not involved, but I was going to a pro Trump march and I saw a Black Lives Matter, Justice for George Floyd march going on. And I recorded them for about 20, 25 minutes. And I didn't say anything or anything. I just recorded them and let people see what they were doing, because I want to show people both sides of the
No,
equation. I'm a black conservative. I'm proud of where I stand, but I'm not going to be a hypocrite. And I'm not going to act like, oh, I'm on our side. Our side is always 100% right.
right,
We know everything, because that's what they do. So I said, no, this is both sides of the table. You guys can see what they got to say and what we got to say. You can
right.
make an adult choice from there. So
I agree.
Yeah, but I'm glad you brought that up with Antifa and everything because we both totally that's just makes no sense at all. I think what Black Lives Matter need to do in Antifa is totally separate themselves from that. If they want to have their voice really be heard and say, "Hey, look, we're not a part of them at all," separate yourself totally, and then the choices you guys make from that point on, we'll know if it's Black Lives Matter all the way. So
Right.
I'm glad you brought that up. Okay, now this is a topic that's been going on a lot, especially in the Black conservative movement currently, and that's what's your stance on the whole Candace Owens issue when it comes to the comments she made on the George Floyd situation and the apparent divide that's appeared to occur within the Black conservative movement since that uh, her interview or her statements were made.
So I actually had a tweet that went viral because I said I stand with Candace Owens, and a lot of people. I think that people think that when I say that and when I continuously stand with Candace Owens, that means that I agree with Candace Owens on every single issue in lockstep. I don't. And if you actually look at her, like if you actually take the time to be unopportunistic, watch the entirety of the video and watch it from beginning to end, you'll see that she says from the bat, straight off the bat, people are going to hate me for saying this. I don't expect people to agree with me. This is my personal perspective on the George Floyd case, and we can still work together as a movement, but this is my personal stance on it. And so I'm a little disappointed because, like, first of all, I said I support her because I believe she reserves the right to speak as a Black conservative, number one. And just because people don't agree with every single thing that she says on every single topic does not mean that you have to relinquish support from her. So that was the number one reason why I said that I support Candace Owens and why that went viral. But also, in regards to what she actually said in the video about George Floyd and this particular case, another thing that I think was completely misinterpreted and people made it a point to not understand is she completely separated the injustice done by the cop and justice for the family, and how people were reacting to George Floyd and how they were portraying George Floyd. I think and again, there's some people that believe it's racist in how she went about it, but I don't think it is racist how she went about it, because again, she was saying, look, you don't have to depict him as this perfect person, and you can also demand justice. But also, not only that, in recent Black history, the only names that seem to be etched in Black history recently that is going to go down in history are Black people that have been in situations of police brutality. And I think she's saying there's so much more to the Black community, and there's so much more intellect, and there's so many other Black people that are doing such incredible things in the Black community. We should be listening to other voices. And I agree with her on that. And I don't think it's difficult to separate the two issues. I think she's simply saying when there's a picture of George Floyd with Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr., you have to ask yourself, what's going on here? Like, why is this necessary in order to serve justice and send condolences? Not only that, why is there a depiction of George Floyd as Jesus with a
Whoa,
crown of thorns on his head?
whoa! I didn't know about that one. I knew about the
Yeah,
MLK Malcolm X one. That made my skin crawl a little bit, but I never knew about that one.
yeah. Ice Cube posted it, and I'm like,
Oh my god!
again, why? Again, that's just disrespectful. It's just
Pure
disrespectful.
blasphemy. Pure
It,
blasphemy.
yeah, and it's not necessary. And we can send condolences and demand justice without removing reality from the situation. And I think that's what Candace Owens was saying. But I think people purposefully took it the way that they wanted to take it for a lot of different reasons. I think that there's a lot of people that purposefully took what she said the way they wanted to for a particular reason.
Yeah, I kind of got that vibe too. And you see a lot of celebrities, black celebrities are coming out against her. And even Chappelle, who I'm a big fan of, Dave Chappelle, he had his recent stand-up he did, and he threw some shots at her as well. And
Mhm.
he had some personal animosity towards her. And I was just like, man, like, it's so interesting to me because in the black community, we upheld the black woman so much in terms of like Beyonce's and everything like that. She's a black queen, strong black women, Cardi B's, these different women, like, God forbid you say anything negative about them and you're a black person, but somebody like Candace Owens, who carries herself very well, who, stands up for herself, who has substance behind her message, they get any chance they can get to knock her down a peg or two. They take it and they are relentless with it. And I'm
Mhm.
like, wow, man, you guys treat her like she's like a black female Hitler. Like, I don't know how else to say it. Like, and I hate
Right.
using that term because of left, but I mean, it's like that's how they treat her.
Yeah, I agree. And it's like, it's to the point where I'm like, sometimes I wonder, like, do all Black lives matter? Like, I genuinely wonder, like, if a Black conservative or Trump supporter was to be unjustly killed by a police officer, I wonder if they would elicit the same response. Like, I've actually been questioning that, and I thought a tweet go viral saying, if Candace Owens was shot and killed unjustly by a cop, would there be the same amount of outcry? Do all Black lives really matter? Sometimes I wonder because these statements are so hateful, and so out of pocket that I genuinely wonder if all Black lives matter sometimes to these people.
No, that's a very good point because I noticed that too, even within these riots that happen. And like I said, I mean, it makes it clear not all the protests have been riots. They all breaking the press. There've been peaceful protests, but the ones that are broken out in riots, I mean, you got the ex-police officer David Dorn getting murdered just trying to protect his black friend's business that day for over a TV, pretty much. And you had Max Brewster, and I mentioned some of these names in my one of my walk-in talks I did for my videos. Max Brewster, a black male cop who got ran over by ATV in Atlanta during a riot. And there's about five names, other names. I can't remember by heart, not great with names, but five other names of people, men and women who are biracial or black who've been killed during these riots. And
Right.
it's like, but no, and that's when I tell people on the blacks on the left about this, they bring up, George Floyd so quick. But when I bring up Max Brewster or David Dorn, they look at me like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, so you don't even know
So you
about the black lives that have been killed.
yeah,
So I mean, this doesn't make sense to me, and it's like, and it's like, I don't think you have a name like Black Lives Matter, but when Black lives are lost within your cause, you have nothing to say. But
right.
when there's a white cop and a black man, oh, front page news. Al Sharpton's out there dancing with you, everything, and that's a whole different ball game.
Mhm.
But yeah, do you? And this is like a little off-topic question. I didn't have this listed. I was just curious your take on it. What do you think within the black community? Do you think we have an issue with celebrating thug culture in a way? Do you think that's part of the problem?
Yes, and again, I've even, you know, had to talk about, I mean, it's very difficult because there's a lot of Black conservatives now that are going against anyone that will stand against certain parts of Black culture. But the reality is, we do have a culture, and if you listen to rap music, it celebrates thug behavior. It celebrates hoodlum. It celebrates the hoodlum. It celebrates the drugs. It celebrates killing each other. That's what it celebrates, and I think it's very influential in the Black community. Again, a lot of the Black celebrities also celebrate this type of behavior, and I think that's where a lot of Black people gain their insight from. Unfortunately, is Black Hollywood and Black rappers, Black people that are in sports, and so I do believe that we have a problem celebrating things of that nature for sure.
No, I agree with you on that, and that's just something when you're just hearing you talk, it kind of just made me say, let me ask her this little by question because I feel that's an issue going on within the black community. Are we so quickly to celebrate, when a black person is speaking about killing another black person, selling drugs in the black community, and like all the negative, but when you have like a Dr. Ben Carson who separates Siamese twins from the head, the first neurosurgeon in history to ever do that, it's like, whatever. And I'm like, if somebody like Dr. Ben Carson was to something that God forbid something negative or bad to happen to him, I don't see the Black Lives Matter marching through any streets in the name of Dr. Ben Carson. And this is a man who's made history in the world, and it's like totally ignored. So
Right.
that's just something I want to ask you. All right. Well, my next question is, just like on a personal level, what's it like being a black conservative woman in the United States? Have you noticed any difference in the past 4 years? And if yes, if you do notice a difference, do you think it will show up in the polls in November?
Um, I definitely think that there's been a complete shift. I think that there's so many more outspoken Black conservatives in this country, and I think we're seeing it primarily due to President Trump. And also because of things like the Black Leadership Summit that sparked discussion. A lot of us have really chosen over the past 4 years to vocalize our thoughts and vocalize our views on conservatism. And I think it's made a serious impact because we mobilized so much because we believed in Trump's message so much. So I think that we've seen a significant shift in that. And for me personally, what I've learned over the past 4 years, especially being in the Black conservative movement, is that um, I definitely represent myself, and you're not going to be liked everybody like you're not going to be liked by everybody on your own side. I learned that very, 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 very quickly. There's some of us that have completely different ideas of what we want our message to be, and that's okay. But I realized that my ultimate goal is to serve God, to be a vessel for God, and say what I believe and represent myself. And like, I support BLEXIT, I support Turning Point USA, I support a lot of different organizations. I support Black Guns Matter, I support a lot of different causes like that. But I really quickly recognized that as a Black conservative, I represent myself, number one, because that's really the most important thing. You're not going to agree with everybody. And it's just something that you have to recognize going into this, that not everybody is the arbiter of truth. And you're not going to agree with everybody in the movement. You're not even going to be friends with everybody in the movement. There's going to be points where there has to be confrontation. So I've really learned to become my own independent person and say what I believe, regardless of what other people in the Black conservative movement are saying. I don't think that the Black conservative movement has to be an echo chamber.
No, I agree with you on that. One thing I learned by attending TPUSA events, because you remember the first one especially was largest gathering of Black conservatives in American history, over 400 Black conservatives.
Yeah.
Walking through DC with our MAGA hats on, people looking like us, like we're crazy. I never forget that. But what I learned there was, we had Blacks from all around the country there in one place in DC. And when I would see how we would debate and discuss, a lot of it was different because you had Black people that are from the South, Black people from the Midwest, Black people from the West, the East, inner cities, suburbs, any walks of life, because we're all Americans in the day. So America's like that. And when we would present a message, the way I would present a message would be totally different the way another Black conservative there would present a message. And then that'll be different from another way. And at first I was kind of like, oh, that's a little, that's different. I don't know about that. But then I saw people would listen to that person that might not listen to me or might not listen to you. And it's like, so I saw, okay, this is the beauty of the movement is we're not all going to sound the same or present ourselves the same. And
Yep.
we shouldn't,
No.
and you know how it is. So I was like a breath of fresh air to see that and realize that. And since that point on, my stance is I'm going to, like I said, like, I'm glad you brought that up. I do this because I stand for myself, not because I'm catering to the white man or nonsense. I do this on my own will, on my own accord. And, I'm glad there's other Black conservatives out there that are doing the same. And I'm not going to impede on anybody else's growth or try to cause division or beef with another conservative or nothing like that. Because I see that going on. I'm just like, I'm not going to participate in any of that. Even if I don't fully agree the way you present your message or what your message is, I'm not going to impede on what you're doing. So don't do the same with me,
Exactly. And like, that's something that I had to wrap up really quick because, like, I'm always someone that I try to be honest. Like, there was like a moment where division was being caused, and like I was speaking directly out against it. And then I realized, like, I don't have to agree with them. Like, this specific case has really opened my eyes to that. It's like they're catering to a totally different group of people, but they're bringing conservative ideas to that group of people, and that's great. Like Angela Stanton and Candace Owens, totally different approaches to how their message goes about, but they're bringing in different people, and that's great for both of them. And I'm not going to impede on either of their successes just because of things I might disagree with either one of them. They're both bringing people, Black people, into the conservative movement. They're bringing people in general into the conservative movement. So that's why I think it's just best to represent myself, and I can support other people and um, promote other people's content and all that different stuff. But primarily, I just represent myself.
Yeah, facts. Facts. I respect that, and I noticed that about you. That's why I wanted to get you on the show because you're a fighter and you do it in your own way, and you can tell there's nobody who, there's nobody over your shoulder telling you how to speak or what to speak about or how to say it. You just kind of come out and you speak from the heart. So, I was like, I want people like that on the part to be a part of this show that I'm doing. That's the reason I started this podcast, because I saw so many patriots out there who had very strong voices, and all I want to do was just, help them how I could to get their voices heard, because they're doing a great job on their own. But, the more help, the better, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And let me ask you this next question: what's your stance on the Joe Biden's recent remarks? First, in regards to, if you still have to decide who to vote for, then you aren't black. Statement, of course, the infamous statement, and the more recent statement where he made that George Floyd's death has more influence on a global scale than the assassination of Martin Luther King.
So, well, the first statement saying that we aren't black if we're having trouble deciding between him and Trump, I, I have to say this, and I don't say this lightly because the left does this all the time, and I believe that they demonize a lot of legitimate Republican and like libertarian candidates because they automatically associate them with racism, and I hate doing that. I think it's a sin. I think that racism is used way too loosely, but I think other than Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden is one of the most racially insensitive politicians that we have in American history. And not only that, if you just look at his history and how he spoke about black people in the inner cities, specifically black people, not only that, his his clashing and disagreement with desegregating schools. I mean, there's a lot of different things that he just seems very racially insensitive on that it's just almost shocking. And also, he seems so eager to pander to get the black vote. He doesn't seem legitimately interested in black people at all. And he seems like one of the most racist politicians that I've seen in American history. And yeah, it's crazy to me that he thinks as a white man that he can tell not only that, but the person talking to him that if we're considering other options, we aren't black. I mean, that's that's essentially what we were fighting during the civil rights era. I mean, we were fighting against white people that thought that they could tell us how to be black. And they thought that they could tell us what our role was as a black person, which was inferiority and working for them on their plantations and etc. It's like so confusing to me that he even said that. And I feel really bad for his team, the people that work behind the scenes, because
Yeah.
he makes it so difficult and he says so many things that I don't think they're expecting him to say. And so that's really unfortunate. And then his statements about George Floyd's death being more monumental or causing more of an outcry than Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination. I mean, Martin Luther King Jr.'s death will or assassination will be etched in history books forever, forever. And like, I don't agree with everything Martin Luther King Jr. did. I mean, if we look historically, he had a lot of issues with his wife and alleged cheating and things like that. But to compare Martin Luther King Jr., who actively changed legislation as an activist and as a national, I mean, he is a national hero to a lot of people. Comparing him and his assassination to George Floyd is just disrespectful. It's just disrespectful.
No, I absolutely agree, and I know what you're talking about when you talk about when Joe Biden, when he spoke about the Clinton crime bill that he was working, that he was a big help in getting passed, by the way. But
Mm,
they had him at a Congress, kind of get together, where he spoke and he talked about the inner cities and the blacks in inner cities, and he talked about them. If you didn't know what he was talking about initially, you would think he talking about dogs or something like that, because he was just
right.
degrading, and you can hear in his voice the hate and the disdain he had for his community of people. Like, I'll just, like you said, I tell people all the time, if you hear it, I was just waiting for him to say the N bomb. Like, just go ahead and say it. You said everything else at this point, like, except for saying that. So, it's really, he shows his true character when you let him speak. And that's why I think they're trying to keep him from speaking as much as possible, because they don't want the public to know who he really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's disgusting. So, I
Yeah.
had to get your opinion on that, because that's just something that, I can't believe the Democratic Party selected this guy as their main candidate. But
Right.
if you just do enough research, you can see this guy is not good for the black community or any for the country. Period.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this is my last question, last but not least. But what's your stance on red pilling? Do you think it's possible to convert minorities on the left? And if so, what is your opinion is the best approach in doing so?
Recently I've really taken the approach, one of the biggest things and one of the biggest approaches that I've taken recently, especially in the wake of all these police brutality cases coming to fruition, the number one thing and the number one goal that I have is to completely destroy this racial division narrative. Like I grew up in a white community. My family is white, and I've heard people on our own side tell me that because I grew up in a different atmosphere, in a different climate, I can't speak on black issues because I grew up in a white community. And it's like, how did we get so segregated to the point where we genuinely think that we're being intelligent by saying something like, I don't have a voice as a black person because I grew up in a white community? Because, and the thing is, white privilege and all these different things that we keep talking about, I think are super divisive. And I think it shortens our reach. And I think it's important that we come together as Americans because I think that we can make better traction when we are making an effort to bring people together. And so for me, my ultimate goal is to show people how short-sighted it is to solely think about race rather than looking at culture and looking at communities and what their culture is, and especially culture and how cultures are so different that it can change the impact of a certain community. So that's something that I've just really had to focus on, especially as a Christian. Race really isn't mentioned in the Bible. And it talks about how we are supposed to cater to those and help those that are less fortunate and don't have the same opportunities. And so for me, I make an effort to bring people together. That's the number one thing that I've really tried to do. And I think that division is one of the biggest issues that we're facing right now in the country. Polarization is one of the biggest things that we're facing right now in the country. And I think that the media, not just the media, but supremacist groups, and they talk about this, the white and black, and yes, Hispanic supremacist groups are trying to inspire a race war. They want to watch our country burn. And I think that the climate that we're in right now and watching the country burn in some places is scary. And so my ultimate goal is just to bring people together. And I think that, I mean, I get black people in my DMs all the time saying like, you have changed my perspective on how I view the world and how I view conservatism. And
Wow.
so that's my goal.
No, you're doing a great job, by the way. It's like I said, I saw like one time on Twitter, you were just in like on Black Twitter, they call it, and you're kind of going against a whole bunch of people. And I kind of hop in there, and because I saw it was like 10 on 1, and I said a few things, and you were just telling people, hey, message me, DM me if you want, more information. And, you were taking people away from the back and forth, just the conflict, and saying, just talk directly one on one
Yeah,
and go from there. And me personally, people ask me all the time, they see me sometimes going back and forth with multiple, black conservatives, and they're like, Chris, like, stop wasting your time. Like, what are you doing? And like, you guys don't understand that I'm planting seeds doing this. Like, it might seem like we're just going back and forth or whatever, but I'm really in reality, these people are listening. They won't tell me, oh, Chris, thank you for changing my mind. But they keep coming back for more information and keep coming back for debate because they're learning as they're debating against me.
right.
And yeah, and there's been times, like you said, people have come back later on after it's all after the fact and message me and say, hey, man, I hear what you're saying, man. I looked up what you were talking about. I did some research. Yeah, you're right, man. I'm gonna start maybe thinking a little more conservative from this point on. And I said, all right, brother. I didn't say, oh, haha, did I tell you? Rubbing their face down crazy. I said, hey, man, like that's all I ask for you to do, man, is just do your own research, man. You're your own man, and you can make your own decisions. Just listen to what I'm saying and research what I'm saying and see if it's true or not. And I respect the ones out there that do that.
Mm-hmm.
All
And
right.
that's
Well,
what I always try to do is like just have an individual conversation with people. Like for me, sometimes the back and like I go back and forth. I do go back and forth, and I'm not afraid to go back and forth. But They're at a point I'll be like, yeah, just DM me and let's like have a discussion. I'm not just like here because I think people think that because I have a lot of like I've been really gaining a lot of followers on Instagram and Twitter that I'm just not a person and I'm just saying things because I think I'm going to gain followers. I'm not. I will like I have hundreds of DMs of people that I will reach out to one on one because I believe it's important. I believe it's important to take the extra mile and talk to people one on one about what I believe.
No, I absolutely agree with that. And like you said, like, and that's I think a lot of times people see that all they see when they're on the left, the minorities on the left, when they see us, all they see is the views and they see the subscribers and the followers, and they're like, "Oh, they're just doing this to impress the white man." Da, 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 that, and I hear that all the time, and I'm like, I grew up in Maryland, like that's just as blue. I'm in New York City now, but just as blue as New York, if not more blue. Like my childhood friends who were white, I lost 90%, quite a bit of them for supporting Trump. So I'm like, if I was trying to impress the white man, I did a horrible job of doing so because I lost a lot of my childhood friends doing that.
Exactly. I think people forget that just because the majority of white people are conservative doesn't mean there's not a huge percentage of white people that aren't. Like literally 46% of white people vote Democrat. It's not a significant majority like of
No.
people that vote conservative. So that always blindsides me because I'm like there's actually a lot of white people. Like in my state is very blue and we're only like 7% black and it's like these are all white leftists. These are all white people that are leftists that don't like what I have to say. So I'm clearly not catering to their to what they want to hear. But
No, I know. I totally agree. And I don't know about you, when I was younger, I was on the left. I was a Democrat, and I was a staunch Democrat. Thank goodness I grew up. But anyways, but when I was on the left, I would debate a lot about politics. I always was into politics, so I would talk to people who were white people who were on the right once in a blue moon, and I noticed when I would debate with them, they were more excited at the fact that I was young and I was into politics than the fact that I was a Democrat, and they would just say, okay, you're He's like, I respect that you're into politics, young man. I hopefully when you get a little older, you think a little different when it comes to politics, but it's good that you're just young and you're thinking about it already.
mhm,
And then when I decided to become conservative, of 2012, I started thinking about it. 2016, I officially voted for Trump, making it official as I'm voting like a Republican, voting Republican now. And when I did that, I noticed a just switch over, like the whites that were on the left, how they attacked me verbally and a couple times in the past physically and Antifa and stuff like that, compared to when I was on the left, and how they, whites that were on the other side, they just were like, okay, they still had the mutual respect because I was into politics. It wasn't about, oh, you have to be this, you have to be that. And I don't get that now that I'm on the right when it comes to dealing with a lot of times with white people on the left. They don't give me that. They just, you shouldn't be doing this, period. Like, what are you doing?
right.
Yeah. But okay, Shekinah, but that was the end of our interview. I thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule. I see you've been traveling, moving around. I saw the photos of you and Bryson, by the way, lovely photos of you too. I didn't want to get into your personal stuff like that too much, but they were awesome photos, and look like you guys had a great time hanging out and everything like that.
Yeah.
And let the people know out there, because a lot of people are asking. I can see in the chat section how they can find you or follow you. So if you can go ahead and kind of give them where they can locate you at.
Yeah. So real Shekinah, Shekinah, and then sup it's Shekinah, Shekinah. On Twitter is the last one, and Instagram is the first one. And then Facebook, I think it's the Patriots. Or I think it's Shekinah Ruth. So yeah.
Okay. Okay. Great. Great. Great.
Mhm.
Well, everybody, please go out there who's listening today. I hope you enjoyed this interview. Please go out there and support Shekinah. I'm sorry if I pronounced it wrong
Oh, that's
before. Yeah, she like I said, she has great content. I'm always checking her stuff out. I'm still in her memes all the time and some of her posts and her quotes, but I still tag her in it to let her know her name's still there. So it's not my words, but she has very powerful words, and I always like to get it out there to the public and get it out to as many people as possible, because what she's saying is very important, not just in the Black community and conservatism, but the entire country. So I'm going to do my best to help her get her voice heard. All right. But
Thank
thank you so much again, Shekinah. You've been an amazing guest, and I hopefully look forward to doing more interviews with you in the future.
Yes, for sure.
All right. All right, for everybody. Well, that's the end of our interview. God bless everybody out there listening. And like always, God bless the United States of America. Peace out.